Hey people, today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by MeUndies, the best underwear on the planet. Do you need proof? Do you want me to send you a picture of me wearing them? I can do that. Actually, I'm probably not going to do that. You don't want me to do that anyway. Instead, just go to their site, order a pair, and feel for yourself because it's National Underwear Month. What? Did you know that? I didn't know that. I guess it is. And because if you don't love them, they're free. There's literally no risk. Here's the thing. Once you get a taste of the MeUndies experience and all the fun, amazing styles that they have to offer, you're going to want to wear them all the time. That's what I do because they really are the world's most comfortable underwear. That's because MeUndies are made from Lynsey micromodal, a sustainably sourced, naturally soft fabric that's proven to be 3 times softer than cotton. Buy them, try them, and once again, if MeUndies isn't for you, they're totally free. And right now, until August 31st, get 20% off your first pair plus free shipping at MeUndies.com/roll. That's MeUndies.com/roll. MeUndies.com/roll. Now let's do the show.
If you don't feel like you're worthy of the success you're trying to manifest, you'll destroy it. And I think that's a big thing that people don't realize. Like the law of reciprocity will hold for your own self-belief. You really have to believe that you deserve everything good that's coming to you. You have to love yourself, feel that you're worthy enough, have forgiven yourself, because otherwise you'll bring upon yourself punishment to justify how you feel about yourself. So doing that work is actually getting yourself in alignment with that universal reciprocity. So saying, man, I've done the work, I've done the hard labor, I really deserve to reap some of the abundance from this abundant universe. And then you'll start to create situations more favorable for that.
That's Aubrey Marcus, and this is the Rich Roll Podcast. The Rich Roll Podcast. Hey everybody, my name is Rich Roll. I'm your host. Welcome back to my podcast, the show where each week I roll up my sleeves, I get down and dirty, I go deep, I get intimate with some of the planet's most thought-provoking thought leaders, change makers, paradigm breakers across a wide expanse of subjects, including health and wellness, fitness, nutrition, relationships, business, creativity, athletic performance, social betterment, and so much more. Man, I got to tell you, I'm pretty wiped out today. I'm recording this on Saturday afternoon. And so last week I put in this huge training block. Tuesday, I ran a solid hilly 34 miles from Calabasas to Venice, my longest training run to date. And then a day later, I flew up to Lake Tahoe for a brief 2-day high altitude mini training camp with my coach, Chris Houth, along with Olympic medalist swimmer Caroline Burkle. And I did that mainly to work on cold open water wetsuit swimming and running in preparation for the Odilo World Championships coming up in just 3 weeks. So for those of you who are new to the show or to me, Odilo, or as they say in America, Otillo, is a swim run ultra in the very, very cold, chilly Swedish archipelago south of Stockholm. It's about an 8 to 9 hour plus race that entails about 40 miles of running and 6 miles of swimming with over 40 transitions, traipsing basically island to island, all these like little islands that you're kind of leapfrogging over. And among many things that make this adventure race so unique and interesting is that you compete in teams of 2, not as a relay, but you do it together. And my teammate is my coach, Chris Houth. And Thursday, we basically swam and ran most of the day at over 6,000 feet and put in a good percentage of the volume, that the race is going to dole out, about 6 miles of swimming and 20 miles of running over the course of that day. And we were working on acclimating to the weird gear. You do this entire thing in a modified wetsuit with your running shoes on and hand paddles that you swim with and then hold when you're running and a pull buoy strapped to the thigh. So it was all about trying to really acclimate, get used to what it's like to swim with your running shoes on, what it's like to run in a wetsuit, how to communicate with your teammate, strategy with Chris, and all that kind of stuff. And then Friday, we put in another long lake swim and then an amazing trail run up at 8,000 feet on the Pacific Crest Trail up at above Donner Peak. And then I flew home in the afternoon yesterday. So I'm pretty tired. My training has not been optimal over the last couple months with all the travel, but I'm really happy to have put in this huge week. It's my biggest training week in many, many years. But I got to say the altitude just crushed me. And also It was meant to be an experience acclimating to cold water, but the lake just wasn't that cold, and running in a wetsuit in a very dry 80+ degree weather, beyond just the weird looks that we were getting from people driving by, made it more like bad water prep than cold water prep. But in any event, it was a great experience, super instructive and helpful and punishing, but mostly humbling. Otolo is going to be a very, very hard event, and I have nothing but crazy respect for the athletes that specialize in this discipline. And I'm really looking forward to the experience just a few weeks from today. For those who are interested in my training, you can track everything that I've been doing on Strava. Just search my name there. I've been putting up Instagram stories. I chronicled the whole thing on Instagram stories the last couple of days. And I also shot a bunch of video. So I'm hoping to put together kind of like a vlog of that experience. So look forward to that. Also, when I was up in Tahoe, I recorded a podcast with both Chris and Caroline Burkle, and I'm excited to post that later this week. So there'll be more information on all that good stuff then. Okay, today's show. Today I sit down with a guy who, this guy has intrigued me from afar for quite some time. Experimentalist, unconventional fitness junkie, entrepreneur, human optimizer, Aubrey Marcus. Aubrey is the CEO of a company called Onnit, an optimal human performance company named one of the Inc. 500 top 500 fastest growing companies in America for 2015. Onnit produces a really cool wide array of products, everything from supplements for cognition, mood, bone, and joint function, fitness equipment like kettlebells and jump ropes, personal care products, and foods that include everything from Himalayan sea salt to coffee and on and on and on. The Onnit HQ is in Austin. It's this really impressive situation there, which in addition to being the headquarters for the actual product company, also comprises this incredible gym and jiu-jitsu studio where everyone from Super Bowl champion football players, Stanley Cup winning hockey players, Olympic gold medalists, and mixed martial arts champions train. It's really impressive. And on top of being a very active CEO, Aubrey is also the host of both the Total Human Optimization podcast, the Aubrey Marcus podcast, as well as the Warrior Poet project, dedicated to exploring and expanding human happiness and consciousness. What Aubrey has built is certainly impressive, like beyond impressive, but that's not really why I wanted to talk to him. I wanted to talk to him because I think he has a very unique and unusual perspective and way of thinking, a very philosophical way of conceptualizing not just fitness and nutrition, but everything from spiritual growth to masculinity, what it means to be human, what it means to live meaningfully and purposefully and expanded. And I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean in a moment. But first, today's episode is also brought to you by Casper. At some point in my conversation with Aubrey and I talk about sleep and how important it is. And I tell him about how well I sleep when I'm at home, in the tent, in my roof. And it's true. When I go out of town, I really struggle with not sleeping well. And let me tell you, there is a Casper mattress in that tent. And it's a big part of why I sleep so well. We got 3 at our house. Julie loves them. The kids love them. And as I said, there's a twin one that fits perfectly in my rooftop tent where you can find me every single night. Look, you guys, we all need to get a good night's rest, and it shouldn't cost a fortune. That's why Casper pioneered an obsessively engineered mattress at a shockingly fair price. I really do love these guys because they're gutting the middlemen, the resellers, the retailers, the showrooms, all the commission-driven, inflated pricing, and they pass all of that savings over to you guys by selling online at a fraction of what it would cost in a store. First off, and most importantly, the product is amazing. An in-house team of engineers spent thousands of hours developing the Casper, and they continue to develop their mattress using feedback of nearly 500,000 customers. But here's the part I really appreciate. Buying a Casper mattress is super easy. You order online, it's available in the US, Canada, and now the UK. It's delivered right to your door in this compact box. The whole affair is completely risk-free because they offer this crazy free 100-night home trial complete with free delivery and free return. So if you don't love it after sleeping on it for 100 nights, they'll pick it up and refund you everything. Why do they do this? Because they understand the importance of truly sleeping on a mattress before you commit, especially considering you're going to spend a third of your life on it. Right now, I've got a special offer for the RRP tribe. Get $50 toward any mattress purchase by visiting casper.com/roll and using the promo code ROLL. That's casper.com/roll, promo code ROLL. Terms and conditions apply. Okay. Also, before we get into the conversation, I want to share some awesome news with you guys in relation to my recent podcast with Scott Harrison of Charity Water. I got this email the other day from Jason, who works with Scott at Charity Water, and this is what he wrote. Rich, we've seen a great response from your podcast in the last week. As of this morning, there have been 100 new spring subscribers directly attributed to you with an average subscription value of $25.40. That's $30,480 of annual recurring revenue. Typically, we start to see the engagement tail off, but I will continue to monitor and send you another update in a couple of months. Thank you for helping us grow the spring. So that's awesome. And then I got another email the other day that says this: I'll take the opportunity to quickly update you that we now have 115 new spring subscribers directly attributed to you with an average subscription value of $26.60, equaling $36,708 of annual recurring revenue. That's almost an additional well's worth of value in just 2 days since we last communicated. Best, Jason. How cool is that, you guys? That is amazing. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I can't tell you how happy this makes me. Mostly that as a community, this RRP tribe, that you guys, that together we can make such a profound difference in so many lives. I mean, think about it. 4 wells, 4 villages will now have access to clean water for the very first time in history because you guys took action. The impact of this is astounding. It will have just unimaginable consequences on current and future lives beyond our imagination. And it just blows my mind. It warms my heart. I'm so inspired by all of you that we, as a company, my company, has decided to sponsor one well, an entire well, every single year from this point forward. So check it out. That makes almost 5 wells this year alone. 5 wells, 5 villages permanently transformed for the better by virtue of this little podcast that I put out every week. Unbelievable. I am so grateful. But here's the thing. Can we make it 10? I think that's pretty darn doable, you guys. Most of you guys have an extra 20, 30, maybe even $40 a month that you can donate for such an extraordinary life-changing payoff. So I want you to really think about the impact that each and every one of you guys can have and how amazing it will feel to make that impact. So stop what you're doing and really consider making a donation to Charity Water via the Spring, their monthly subscription service. To learn more and to join, all you got to do is go to cwtr.org/richrollspring, cwtr.org/richrollspring. I'll put that in the show notes as well. Really important that you use that URL so that they know that you're coming to them through this podcast, and together we can cultivate this community spirit over building these wells. And again, thank you so much. So Aubrey first came onto my radar via his many appearances on Joe Rogan's podcast, which I listen to frequently. And like I mentioned previously, I just dug how he thinks about life and how he articulates his unique perspective in a compelling way. And it struck me that the two of us together, on the face of things, 2 very different types of people with some varying opinions and perspectives, would make for a compelling conversation. So when I was in Austin this past spring, I made a point of reaching out to Aubrey. Aubrey was game. We sat down, and what transpired is what I think is a pretty interesting conversation. So this is a conversation about many, many things. It's about the vision quest that catalyzed Aubrey's unusual path. It's about ayahuasca, his perspective on that, which I think is pretty interesting. It's about his entrepreneurial journey in leveraging podcasting to launch and grow on it. It's about his upcoming book, Own the Day. But mostly it's a conversation about how self-worth, self-discovery, and the internal work are really the keys to outward success. Okay, this might be my longest introduction in the history of this podcast, so I appreciate you guys listening. Should we talk to Aubrey? Let's talk to Aubrey. All right, man. The warrior poet. In the flesh, man.
Here I am.
You ready to rock?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you too, brother.
I've been following you from afar for a spell. Heard you a bunch on Rogan, other podcasts, and been tracking how you've built this incredible company, and wanted to have a chance to meet you and talk to you. It's funny, I was in Austin, and And it just occurred to me yesterday that I was like, I should try to figure out how to get in touch with you. Like it's a last minute thing. And I realized we have the same book agent. So I called up Bird and I was like, Bird, you got to put me in touch with Aubrey. So I'm glad that you made time on a last minute. I didn't expect you to be able to carve out the time. So I appreciate it.
I was at home writing. So
you were working on the book.
Break. Look, I don't need that much of an excuse to get me out of writing. So I was like, yes,
anything,
absolutely.
Right?
I would love to. Yeah.
It's cool. Bird's awesome. He's been, I don't know what your experience has been with him, but he's a fantastic guy, and I'm so grateful to have him in my corner. So
yeah, likewise.
You're in good hands. How are you doing with the book?
It's a motherfucker, man.
Yeah.
It's a beast, especially research writing. Like if I can just espouse philosophy, that doesn't need citations, I can write pretty quick and pretty efficiently. And I'm really comfortable in that realm, drawing on personal experience and kind of logic and kind of sorting your way through complex metaphysical issues. But when it comes down to the nitty gritty and every fact that you say needs a citation,
you got to back it up.
Reference. You
can't just like have diarrhea of the mouth like you can on a podcast.
But it's good. It's a discipline that, I think is helping build my skill set, my knowledge base. This is in a way, helping me sharpen my sword, get my game a little tighter so that, and because I found some things that you even take for granted, random things that you think but then you actually go look for the citation. You're like, well, maybe that's not quite right. Maybe that's just one of those things you take for granted. But when you really look deeper into it, you find out some things that you didn't know. So it's been a good process.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, my experience with that is that you go into it with an idea of what you think it's going to be, and then it starts to tell you what it is, and that leads you in sometimes a little bit of a different direction.
Yeah, totally.
Are you like, do you have like a release date? Like, are you locking down on it? I have a manuscript
due date, which is June 30th.
Right.
And then from there, we're looking at March, April release.
That's cool. Is it still, it's called Seize the Day?
Own the Day.
Own the Day. Okay. Yeah. Right. That's cool, man. I'm excited for you with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's a great process to go through.
It's cool to get the whole cornerstone of my philosophy, about human optimization down in one place too. Because it's cool to write articles, but then you have to rely on this whole giant blog and people linking everywhere. But now this is going to be like, all right, this is a perfect day as far as I can see.
Right. So the idea is it takes you through one day and kind of how to manage your day and optimize every aspect.
What does one perfect day look like?
Right.
And obviously
cool. It's a unique take on, kind of how to live your best life.
Right. Yeah. If you can do one day, then you can do 5 days and you can do 10 days. But at least you know what that one day is. A little bite-sized entry. Let's
talk about your philosophy, because you're an interesting cat, dude. You're a little bit of a conundrum. On the one hand, you're a super alpha male kind of guy, but you're also the warrior poet. You have this, very spiritual side to you that I think traditionally or historically has not been sort of associated with masculinity. So I think it brings up a really interesting conversation about like gender identity and what does it mean to be masculine or to be a man. And I feel like we're in a very interesting kind of phase in culture right now where those lines are getting blurred in a kind of unique way. Like suddenly it's all about transgender. You see like a lot of things that, 10 years ago was not part of like the cultural discussion, and now it very much is. But I think you sit at this interesting intersection point between extreme masculinity, but also super interested in, more esoteric subjects that I think were kind of traditionally the purview of, the guy in the white robe with a man bun.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, that was the idea of the warrior poet, right? Like before there was On It, before any of this, I mean, I had this idea that we should be able to travel down both extremes and experience life to the fullest by expanding the spectrum of experience. So, be able to know what it feels like to, throw a punch or a kick and see someone's knees wobble, and know what it feels like to be fasting on a mountaintop for 5 days and getting closer contact with your consciousness. Like all of these different things that used to actually in some warrior traditions, like the Bushido of Japan, where a great samurai like Miyamoto Musashi or great swordsman would be the best swordsman and also great at calligraphy and writing and this kind of well-balanced approach, or even Socrates, who is known for his philosophy, but also like ferocious, like a lion in battle, where people were more balanced. As you said, people got kind of steered into one way or another, whether it was that kind of classic warrior archetype of a physical athlete, kind of the jock that you see it showing up in all these 80s movies, right? Or it was the Wall Street broker who had the same idea, but just a different battleground. It was business instead of sports, but missing that other side. And then there was the other side. There was the hippie, there was the stoner, there was the philosopher who was, out of touch with their body. And I really saw the value of both sides. And, I didn't invent it. This, as I said, this is part of old warrior cultures. But that idea of the warrior poet, I thought, fuck yeah, that's the way I want to live.
Yeah, if you go back in time, if you go back in history, whether it's the samurais or every other sort of religious, spiritual tradition, there was, this very masculine, sort of iconic persona that embodied all of those things. I mean, Shiva, I mean, you could go on and on and on with who these characters are. And we've lost that, right? Like, you're either somebody who lives in their head because you're an executive or you're just in the workforce or you're an athlete. But we've segmented these things and we've decided that you have to adopt one identity or the other, and that's how you define yourself and that's who you are. And in some sense, we've lost that enthusiasm for being not necessarily Renaissance, but just for being sort of more comprehensive in how we, walk through the world.
Yeah, that's balance to me. I mean, really, I wanted to find balance by stretching the spectrum out to the extremes as far as possible and understanding, both elements. Like how, instead of just finding balance by staying really close to the center, that wasn't interesting to me, or being out of balance by being too far on the yin side or too far on the yang side. I wanted to say, all right, let's broaden the spectrum. Let me go as far out on each side as I can, experience the most extreme spirituality where I'm, shedding the identity of myself, my ego, and my body as aggressively as I can, or go in the other side and be embodied as much as I can and go into some of the toughest sports and competitions and trials of physicality that I could find. And that's where some of the greatest magic is that you can find, is just testing your limits on both sides. So that's become a real passion of mine.
Self-knowledge and through experience. But it also brings up, how you define balance in your life. I think we sort of think about balance as sort of being balanced in every moment throughout the day, like where we're giving everything its proper due and attention moment by moment. And, my experience is my relationship with balance is very different. Like, I go into the extreme and vacillate between one thing or the next. And in the sort of macro sense, I think I'm a balanced individual, but when I'm in something, I'm like all in it. Right. Yeah. It's a different kind of way of thinking about balance.
It's like a longer time window that you're looking at balance, right? It's just stretching that graph out to months, years, a lifetime. Because you could pursue something on one side for years even, but then to find balance, perhaps in the recovery from that, or on the other side, you spend years on the other side. So it's stretching the window by which you define balance out to your life. And then that's how you decide balance. Because I agree, like, to pursue and to really push the boundaries on either side, you need to dedicate chunks of time. You need to do longer spiritual fasts or diets, like I've done, to really push that envelope. You can't just do it in a day or an afternoon.
Right.
You have to dedicate yourself to that. Same with the other pursuits.
Where does this, where does this come from? Like, what's the origin story here, man?
I think for me,
I know you had a naturopath stepmom, right?
I did, yeah. So
sort of, I'm imagining like a little bit of a hippie mom.
That helped. That definitely helped. I think what it really was is I was really into sports. Sports were kind of everything when I was growing up. Like,
you grew up here in Austin?
High school here in Austin. And obviously high school sports in Texas are crazy. We get 3,000, 5,000 people at our basketball games. It was an obsession at that point. And so I was pretty out of balance. And I was at that point kind of pretty atheistic, actually. I'd seen what I felt like were the faults and failures of organized religion and discarded all spirituality because of that. But then, as kind of like a rite of passage, when I was 18, and my father actually, encouraged me to do this, to go out with a shaman in the mountains of New Mexico and have my first psychedelic experience.
Your dad encouraged you to do that? What kind of dad do you have?
Which was rad.
Your dad's like a businessman, right?
He was, yeah. He was a commodities trader. But he also sought this other path. And when I was 18, he encouraged me. He's like, all right, you should go out and have your vision quest, And I was super nervous, never done anything like that.
That's a trip, because I would imagine a guy like that's like, look, man, you got to go to business school.
He was that way too. Mm-hmm. He was a unique character as well, because he still wanted me to be like a bond analyst or some kind of very conventional, go work at Goldman Sachs. He wanted me to go to the school with the right credentials, all of that. But then he also understood that there was some value, because he'd found that to get balance in his own life, because he was way out of balance. So he'd used that kind of, experiential spirituality path to help bring a modicum of balance in his life.
That's interesting. So the whole psychonaut thing comes from the dad.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's obviously, that's part of your dad. I mean, he wouldn't have married a naturopath doctor.
Right. If he hadn't figured out a few things that plants could do for him.
Yeah. So you're 18 when you do that?
Mm-hmm.
So where do you go?
I went to the mountains. It was the mountains in New Mexico. And and then took a combination of psilocybin and MDMA.
And you're still in high school.
I was just graduated.
Yeah.
About to go to University of Richmond. And and I went out there, and I had no idea what to expect. I was worried I was going to lose my mind. I'd never been out of control, but I just kind of...
Were you like a partier in high school, or just pure jock?
Drinking.
Yeah. Texas football.
I mean, I think I smoked weed once with my brothers and just ate a bunch of food and listened to, Led Zeppelin or something like that. But nothing that I would consider, anything more than out of the party setting.
Right.
So went in there, and within 2 hours, I felt my body pretty much evaporate and something else persist. And that thing, which now I would quite comfortably call consciousness, I didn't even have a name for it. I was like, whoa, there's something beyond this physical experience. And I was, at that point, it just recalibrated, my whole life. From there, I realized, all right, this is another side of life. This, this consciousness, this feeling that I have now is as good as hitting that game-winning shot. It's just completely different. It's on a whole other side of the spectrum, and it's as valuable as anything I've ever pursued on the other side, because the knowledge and the information and the way I was able to look at things and reevaluate all my decisions in my life, I realized that needed to be a key part of, of my path. And so that really helped propel me along that side. Now, a few other things, I always did like writing poetry. I had, kind of a writer's instinct for a long time, and that was something of a balance to the sports. But
I would
really
imagine that probably got repressed though in high school.
It did. Well, it didn't work.
Yeah.
Every girl I wrote a poem to, instantly, my stock just plummeted. It was so frustrating to me, because in an era long gone, that was courtship, right? That was how you won someone over. If you were a great athlete,
badassery to be able to do that.
Exactly. But it was just laughable. You wanted, at that time, that kind of counterculture movement of the person who didn't give a fuck was the person that was the most highly sought after. Mm-hmm. It was in that kind of nirvana era, right? And I think that was really frustrating to me. And if I go back and read my old journals, it's just littered with frustration. I got all of these talents that would have been appreciated back a long time ago, and here I am, and it's not being rewarded by society.
So you come back from this Vision Quest experience.
Yeah.
What do you tell Dad?
I mean, I told him everything, and he just he'd been there. He'd known what that was, and he just, acknowledged all right, and now. The beauty of it is it's a show not tell kind of thing. It's not like he was trying to put his own interpretation or his own spin on what happened. He's like, well, now you've seen this path for yourself, and this path is your own. So explore it as you will, and that's the cool part about it.
So you head to college, and now you got a different. Your perspective's a little bit tweaked,
yeah, for
right?
Sure. For sure.
You end up studying philosophy, right?
Yeah,
and
philosophy,
civilization,
classical civilization, double major. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a unique choice for a jock type guy, right? And so you're starting.
Well, I had to figure out some things after that experience.
Well, I would imagine you're kind of gestating on a bunch of different sort of spiritual ideas,
Yeah.
right? So the atheism is kind of getting pushed aside, and you're making room for some new concepts.
Yeah, because I felt something that I felt like extended beyond what, rationalist, imperialist science could explain.
Mm-hmm.
I felt something that felt eternal beyond the existence of the body. What in religion they would call the soul, like what in, you could also call consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that, so I needed to find my own way to explain that, and so I went deep into religion, philosophy of religion, and I tried to understand it from that perspective, from the science perspective, and then carve out my own, spiritual, metaphysical understandings as well.
So how do you define that for yourself today?
That's really a challenge because it draws from a lot of different language and lexicons that have a lot of different people have talked about. So I like to use the word consciousness. I like the idea that there's a collective consciousness or a source, which could also in a religious context be called God, this like universal force that I've come into contact with and felt and experienced, and it feels like we are a small piece of that, like we're one facet on this giant diamond, one grain of sand on this giant beach, but the beach is also a force itself. And so you can get that from in different ways in Eastern philosophies and other philosophies. They just have different lexicons and different kind of concepts. Right. Even in traditional monotheistic religions, if you go into the deeper mystical teachings, you'll find the ways that they describe this. But I really encourage the experiential path. Like, go out and don't take anybody's word for it. Just go out and experience it. Find the ways that you can get in touch with these forces, whether it is psychedelics or meditation or ecstatic dance or float tanks or yoga, whatever your path is. All of them are valid. Holotropic breathing or shamanic breathing, all of these ways can start to get you in touch, and then see for yourself, find out what you can find.
So it doesn't really, it can't be sort of quantified in terms of, well, I'm sort of Buddhist, or I'm sort of, you're just looking for universal truths that kind of find their through line and thematically resonate with you through the various experiences that you've had. Yeah,
I think all of these lines of demarcation where you say you're one thing or another thing are ultimately fallacies anyways. Like even national borders, like, oh, I'm American, not Canadian. Well, we're fucking everything at this point. We've picked up little bits of all of these cultures, little ideas from everything, but we just carve out these lines and say, okay, we're on this side of the line or this side of the line. That's not real. I mean, even these, we just like these binary systems, even like the idea of guilt or innocence. Like, is anybody ever really fully guilty or fully innocent? But nonetheless, at a certain point, we draw a line and say, okay, you're guilty, you go to jail. You're not guilty, you don't go to jail.
It's
everything
the nature of the human brain.
Exactly.
We need to categorize everything. We need to put everything in a certain box so that we can understand it. And I think it's a control thing too. That way we feel like we feel safe, right? Mm-hmm. But it is all illusion. I mean, why do we even look at the globe the way we look at it? Why should it, what if you just flipped it upside down and redrew all the maps? You know what I mean?
Right.
You would look at it and it would look like a different planet to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's just a tiny example of how we do that throughout our day with everything. And it applies
brains.
to everything, whether it's politics. It applies to nutrition and the way we think about food. And we break it down into, well, it's carbohydrates, protein, and fat. But, really, that's a very deductive approach to looking at not just food, but anything, right?
Or saying something's good for you or bad for you, right? Mm-hmm. When everything is dose dependent and person dependent, it's good fat. Well, yeah, 100%. But if you ate only sticks of butter, for your whole life, no longer is it good, and it's something that's bad for you at the right time and in the right place. Maybe it's okay. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, we do like to create these buckets where we can put things, but really it's all, as you said, an illusion.
So when you're in college, are you starting to feel like I would imagine this is creating a little bit of a tension with your social environment, right? If you're in college, it's about, what college is about. It's partying and going to class. And if you're starting to explore these more esoteric ideas, that's going to set you apart a little bit, I would imagine, from your classmates.
It did. But, I always find myself being able to relate to people on their level, and I didn't have a big agenda. There was no kind of proselytizing, concept where I was trying to convert people to my way, because I didn't even know what my way was. So if the idea of the time was, all right, beer pong, get drunk, go try to find some girls to talk to, like I could get right in that mode without, stress. Just like, all right, that's the micro game we're playing in the big game, like, got it. Let's have fun doing that. And so I was able to kind of maneuver through that. But what I was frustrated in was that what I felt like, was the full representation of who I was, certainly wasn't appreciated or celebrated at large. It was kind of like a curiosity rather than the goal. Like everybody wanted to just put you on one side or the other. And, I didn't fit in either side. I fit in both sides.
Were you starting to go on more of these vision quests at this point? Yeah. Yeah. Where does the ayahuasca come in?
Ayahuasca didn't come in till later. So that was kind of the, that one is harder to do locally, especially at that time when I was doing it. That was 6 years ago. And it's amazing how much more prevalent it's become in 6 years with shamans traveling, all through the States and offering ayahuasca here locally. But back then that was a lot less common. And also now I run in those fields, so maybe I'm more exposed to it. But I do know that it's a lot more common. So anyways, I just read this book. Book was called Shaman Healer Sage. Interesting book, but I knew that the author of that book was leading retreats down to Peru where he was offering ayahuasca. Not him himself, but he partnered with some other shamans. So I just wrote in a letter and signed myself up. And it was right about the time that I was starting on it. But at that point on it was much more of a vague idea. I kind of had thoughts that it was just going to make like hangover pills was really what I was thinking about making. I had a very kind of niche idea of what on it could be. And then went out to do the ayahuasca, and not only, I've talked about these experiences many times, but not only was it incredible personally, changed the way that I approached death, my fear of death, showed me different, capabilities, it felt like, of my consciousness and the ability to heal my own body, it's felt like, and do amazing magical seemingly magical things. It also gave me a very clear direction of what on it could be and the way that I needed to, adjust things and do things in accord with the most fluid path to allow myself to express, what was really inside myself, and allow, people to really understand and grasp what this thing was going to become.
That's amazing. So you came out of it with that level of clarity.
It was really incredible. I mean, I could visualize everything all the way through, even to now. Like, nothing that's happened with On It has been a surprise. And I think a lot of that was because that night, under the influence of that, hallucinogenic DMT containing brew in the jungle, listening to the icaros and the sounds of the birds and the stealthy jaguars, going through the jungle, and the crocodiles in the water, and this whole crazy environment that I was in, I was able to see something incredibly practical about how to build this business.
It's super interesting to me. I've had a bunch of people on the podcast who have had similar experiences, and I certainly can't deny the impact of those experiences on various people's lives, and it's undeniable in your life. I see it in Rogan as well. Mm-hmm. It's curious for me, and I'm like, I have like a mixed emotions about it. I'm a long time sober dude, like from drug and alcohol recovery for a long time. So when I think about somebody saying like the answer to your dilemma, lies in the power of a mind-altering substance, that's like good news to me. Like that triggers my inner addict, and it makes me, crave that experience, which is scary to me, right? Because the danger flags run up for me, and so I don't know that I'll ever do it. But I've talked to so many people that have had, amazing experiences with it. So I have no judgment on it, and I have no experience with it directly. But I also think, here's one thing I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on. I have some friends who have not only done ayahuasca, they've made it like this incredibly frequent practice. Like I was with a friend in New York City a couple months ago and went out to lunch with him, and he was telling me about all his various experiences. And I think he said he had done it like almost 100 times in like a year and a half.
Wow.
Like that's literally like, hey, it's Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, you know, like if you can't find what you're looking for through, you know, a couple periodic, you know, experiences, like why are you going back? Why are you going back? Why are you going back?
Yeah. And that's, there's a lot of good points there. And I think, you know, as I was saying earlier about whether something's good or bad, you can't say that ayahuasca is either a drug or a medicine. It just depends completely on the user, how you're using it, the intent from which you're using it. You know, like Tylenol, for example, it's a good medicine for a lot of people, but you take too much, your liver's going to fail and you're going to die. You know, ayahuasca in the same way, it can be an incredibly good medicine, but it can also just be a drug. You know, it can be something that you can use to chase altered states of consciousness.
Or just to get out of however you're feeling, to
escapism.
escape your reality.
And so I think all of these things are neutral tools, and it just depends on how you use them. But the experience, you know, to go back to your sobriety thing, the experience tends to feel like hyper sobriety. Like it tends to feel like you're now less drunk on your ego and your delusions and all of these things that we're drunk with in our waking life. And all of a sudden you're actually sober for the first time in your life. Like the fears, the greed, the ego, the identity, all of these things that have clouded your vision and made you think a certain way. It feels like that gets lifted. And for the first time, you're actually clear-headed. And so it's an interesting thing because a lot of people, and I'm not necessarily advocating that it's a path for you, but a lot of people who have had addiction issues and have had drug issues, you know, it's a much different experience than I think you'd expect, because it's almost like you're more you than you've ever been. So it's like, it really does feel like hyper sobriety.
Yeah,
you know?
No, it's interesting. I mean, I had this guy, Gabor Mate, on the podcast.
Yeah, I know. I
You
had Gabor on mine too.
Oh, you did?
Amazing guy.
Yeah, he was incredible. I mean, he blew my mind, and we had this amazing talk, and ayahuasca didn't come up in the context of our conversation, but afterwards when we were done, he's like, listen, you might benefit from this, call me, you know. And it's like, yeah, I was like, I don't know, man.
I mean, if you got the invite from Gabor Mate,
yeah, I know.
Man, that's like,
but
that's
still,
about as good as it
but I
gets.
also have lots of you know, friends and people in recovery who are like, yeah, I don't think you need it. You're on your path and you're a seeker. And I've had, you know, I can't say that I've had the kind of experiences that you have had, but I've had glimpses of perhaps what that might be like through, you know, ultra endurance sports, like when it just strips you away because you're you're so beyond exhausted and you're forced to meet yourself in a very pure way. I've had interesting experiences with holotropic breathing. You know, I've had some weird ones with that where in the wake of it, like the first couple times I did it were ecstatic experiences, almost like feeling like I was high. And then I went through a phase where I would do it occasionally and I would get super angry and I would have to like lock myself in a room and avoid other people for like 24 hours. So it's obviously bringing something up from my subconscious or, you know, some aspect of my consciousness that needed to be looked at.
Yeah. And that's, you know, for people who are thinking like holotropic breathing, like that's like kind of the easy thing compared to ayahuasca. Like you can't discredit any of these ways that you get to the mountain. There's multiple paths up the same mountain. You know, you're really trying to get yourself to that state of consciousness. And holotropic breathing for me has been as cathartic as any other medicine that I've ever taken, from iboga to ayahuasca to all of these, you know, really intense psychedelics. You know, just sitting in a room breathing with a bunch of people, you know, I probably cried more tears and felt more emotions, you know, push through me than with any other modality. It's really interesting. You know, every medicine has its own path. Every medicine path has its own kind of unique characteristics, and you can't say that one is stronger than the other. You can't. And I have people do that all the time with drugs. Like there's a hierarchy or these plant medicines. They'll say, oh, I could never do mushrooms because one time I ate too much weed and I freaked out. I was like, yeah, everybody who eats too much weed freaks out. Like that's not the easy one. You know, like none of these are the easy button. Like whatever your path is, and I know I've never done any kind of ultra endurance, but I've been around fighters during weight cuts, and there's a point, and I've talked to Mike Dolce about this too, there's a point during the weight cut where you're completely depleted of fluids, of food, of everything, and that point where it feels like the same parts of the brain that power down when you're on psychedelics, they power down too. And you have what's left was like the essential consciousness of the individual. And a lot of times you have to fight through different anger and emotions and things that'll come up at that point, but then you're left with, real truth, at the baseline. So many different ways up the mountain, and all are valid and all are good.
Yeah. I think whatever you choose, it's about the journey up the mountain. It's not about the peak. It's not about getting there.
There's no destination, man.
Yeah, it's about devoting yourself to personal growth in whatever modality seems to resonate with you. And there's certainly plenty of those now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all right. So you come back from this experience and you have this clarity about on it. And you just gave me a tour before the podcast. It's quite an operation you got going here, man. I mean, it is like impressive. It's super cool. And it hasn't been that long, right? It's been like 7 years.
Yeah. July 2011, we launched Alpha Brain, and that was a couple months after I got back from the jungle. And, that was really where I count the founding of the On It as we see now. Alpha Brain kind of took this company in the direction that it is headed now.
Is that still the best-selling product that you make? Yeah, I use that. I use Alpha Brain, I use Shroom Tech, and I use the Hemp Force.
Nice.
So I appreciate that you have vegan products.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely.
No, it's good stuff, man. And what you're doing, like 28 million in revenue now, something like that?
Those are old numbers. That was from
the
Inc. That was from the Inc. 500 list that we made. Doing a little better than that now, but don't really talk about the hard numbers too much, even though that Inc. report kind of let the cat out of the bag. But everything is going really well, and so many different areas that have been, maybe if you looked at the bottom line, not the biggest part, but just make this thing such a rich experience, like the gym that you saw.
Yeah, the gym is amazing.
And then now we're partnered with Bang Muay Thai and, 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. We have a yoga studio franchise, Black Swan Yoga, which is, one of the mainstays here in Austin.
It's a yoga studio here also, too? Oh, I didn't
in
see
Austin.
that.
Not on site.
Not on site here.
Yeah, we have 3 studios in town and one in Houston.
Right. And I was saying to you, like, if you're a serious athlete and you live in Austin, you're insane if you're not coming here to train.
Yeah, this is the spot.
It's pretty impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really cool. And there's a couple things that come to mind in thinking about this. Like, first of all, there is no market more crowded than the supplement market, right? And there's also no market that is rife with more snake oil salesmen and charlatans and people trying to rip you off. And, I know a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit about, this world. And I know that there's a lot of junk out there, right? And so first of all, just the fact that you were able to create a brand and distinguish yourself and kind of rise above that fray is no small feat. And secondarily, to be able to, put out a quality product amidst all the bullshit that's out there, because these labs and if you're not on it, if you're not on top of what's going on and paying attention, who knows what goes into this stuff. It's not regulated, and it's frightening, I think, for the consumer or the customer who wants a quality product, goes to the store, and it's like, how do you know what's what?
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting space. It definitely doesn't have a lot of positive PR surrounding it, and I think that's really justified. I think the old model was, pump and dump. Let's get a lot of hype behind something. Oh, this is the new weight loss extravaganza. Buy this. You don't have to do a thing, and you'll lose a bunch of weight, and all of these different things that people were talking about that really weren't real. And then people using that distributor model, which really forces them to cut the costs. Like if you're selling to a distributor who's selling to a wholesaler who's then selling to the customer, it really forces you to drive your cost to the floor and then put almost nothing in your supplements. And I think what's really allowed us, first of all, our ethos, what we stand for, and also the fact that we are selling largely just direct to the customers. It's allowed us to have a much higher cost of goods and really put some great stuff in our products.
You stepped into retail, though. I've seen it.
It's at
I shop
Sprouts
at Erewhon in near my house. That you guys they're carrying it there.
And we have room for that. What we don't have is like the bigger chains. They all go through distributors, and so if the distributors were selling to Sprouts, then selling to the consumer, at that point, the margins just aren't there, because we have to put as much quality shit as we can in there, and then also fund things like the clinical trials that we've done, which I think is a real differentiator. I don't think I've seen anybody that's using largely plant-based products and then taking them through rigorous clinical trials like we've done with Alpha Brain, like 2 double-blind randomized trials with the Boston Center for Memory, who reported, people are saying, oh, you paid for it. Yeah, but they reported 12 null results findings in a row before they did Alpha Brain. I mean, this is the credibility of their entire organization on the line. If Alpha Brain didn't work, they would have published it. That's what they did. So we put ourselves on the line and then duplicated those results in both independent trials with statistical significance. So that's something that really very few companies outside of like drug companies testing drugs.
It's expensive.
I mean, like, all said and done, close to $500,000 to get those trials all the way through and support that. But it's something that I think was important for us to do, to show that, hey, what we're saying is legit. Alpha Brain, not only will you be able to feel it, but here it is, tested against placebo, and here's how it works.
I think the average consumer would be shocked to know that if they went to the store and bought a random selection of 12 or 15 supplements, protein powders, whatever, and sent them to a lab to have them tested, and then compared what the actual ingredients are to the nutrition facts panel on the product, they would be amazed at how much it doesn't resemble what it's advertised to be.
Right.
And a lot of that has to do with these labs where the products are made, where they're making all different kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of contaminants that get into this stuff. And there's a lot of shysters ripping people off. And they're telling, all these people that have little brands like, oh yeah, we're making your stuff. And if you're not paying attention, they dilute it. And there's a lot of crooks out there. So how did you figure out how to align with the right labs and make sure that you could ensure that kind of, quality control?
Well, we audit every facility that we go to, first of all, like boots on the ground audits with our regulatory and compliance team. We go through the assays and the testing from the raw ingredient suppliers to the encapsulators and mixers. And we just follow every step and look at every ingredient, make sure that those ingredients have been tested, then look at the final batch, make sure that's been tested, and then just kind of watch every different way, because greed is a factor. And, when these companies are dealing with, 15-20% margins a lot of times in these encapsulators and mixers, it's not huge margin business. If they can carve out another 10% by diluting your product, they might have the motivation to do that. I think what's changing now is that the internet is providing such easy access to information. It's really tightening up the game. Like, I think what you were describing was incredibly common 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. But now with all of the review systems that are out there, all of the ways that information travels like lightning fast. I mean, think about how fast that, United stock plummeted when they pulled that dude off a plane. Like, back a long time ago, you could yank people off the plane all the fucking time. Wouldn't matter. But people start, if that starts to happen now, the world knows instantly. And I think that's the way that you really get an industry that's had formerly bad practices back in line.
Do you think that's enough, or do you think that there's room for additional regulation? Because it is so unregulated.
Yeah, I really like that the free market has the opportunity to do this, because I don't necessarily believe that a central regulation body is going to actually be any better. They're still as corruptible as any. I mean, if you look at some of the regulatory bodies, like look at the scheduling of marijuana, for example, like that's something severely wrong with the scheduling of marijuana. High incidence of addiction and harm, no possibility of medical treatment. Well, that's clearly false, but yet nonetheless, the regulatory bodies are still scheduling it as a Schedule I drug. Like, things exist like that are clearly that the people with the largest pockets have been funding and driving these regulators towards different ends. But when you decentralize that regulation and allow the free market, to say everything and kind of accreditate different organizations based on their own reputation, I think you can get actually probably a little bit closer to the truth. But, one area I think that the regulations are solid is, safety, as far as like testing and ensuring that the products are safe for consumption. I think that's one thing that that the government does do a really good job of. I mean, every facility that we've been to has FDA GMP audits regularly, where they're going through and making sure that everything possible is being done to make sure that the products aren't, harmful and contaminated. And if you actually look at the amount of, serious adverse effects for supplements compared to drugs, I mean, it's a wild discrepancy. I mean, pharmaceuticals are killing people, hurting people left and right, and supplements, you hear about a few random cases that have happened with something like ephedra or like a tainted batch of tryptophan that came from Japan. But for the most part, it's really actually not harming people. Now, whether it's actually doing any good,
right? There's
the
a difference
question.
between harm and actually just getting what you think you're paying for, right? And I think that's where it can be neutral. It's just not what you think you're getting.
So the government takes care of that part, and then the plaintiff's attorneys are really cleaning up the other aspect. Different supplements claiming, there was a big supplement, slips my mind right now, but a big supplement, a brain supplement that just that just got busted and sued for like $100 million or something like that, because they were putting out information targeted towards seniors saying that this supplement was going to improve memory long term, and they had some chicken shit bullshit study and a graph that was way disproportionate, and the free market again came and sued them and then just basically crushed that company. So the free market forces are stronger, I think, than people realize. Like at any point that you step out of line, there's an attorney or the FDA or the FTC that's ready to whack you back into line.
Right.
But first, before that happens, it's the public outcry, which is the first line of defense. What social media is saying, what everybody else is saying. So while in some regards, like if tighter standards were to be put in place, it would probably benefit on it. I am reticent to give centralized power over anything, just being that I've seen it misused too many times. It's just, maybe it's just the libertarian in me as well.
No, I get that, and this is something I did a podcast yesterday with John Mackey, who's essentially a libertarian in certain respects, at least with respect to business. He has some very interesting ideas about capitalism, conscious capitalism, and he's mired in this crazy shareholder war right now. There's a couple of huge hedge funds that have taken big positions in Whole Foods at the moment and are pushing for a sale, and he's trying to toe the line and prevent that from happening. So he's under fire in a big way. But we had a really interesting conversation about free market forces and this idea of conscious capitalism, which is basically a term that he coined and wrote a book about. And as somebody like yourself who is interested in consciousness and running an effective capitalist company in a free market society, how do you think about injecting consciousness into your brand and what you do?
Yeah. To me, it all goes back to the law of reciprocity, right? I think it's something innately we feel, that we want to give equal to what we receive, and that's something that's innate inside all of us. And I think falling back on the law of reciprocity in all of our actions, I think, is the key to conscious capitalism. It's one of the key principles of consciousness. Like if you're in the Peruvian jungle and you're learning the rules, then everything is abiding by the law of reciprocity. I mean, they are animists, so they believe everything has a spirit. So if you want the flame to light your mapacho, which is like a sacred tobacco cigar, you ask the flame, may I have your flame to light this? Even though you won't get a response, it's about this conscious exchange. You don't take anything. If you want to eat an animal, you ask the animal. If you want to harvest a plant, you ask the plant. It's that they're very aware of the law of reciprocity. And I think applying that to business is the most conscious way that you can do anything capitalistic. So that's ensuring that anytime someone buys your product, that they're receiving goods and services equal to what they've paid. And our goal is to not only make it equal, but greater, so that we're running a positive balance in the bank of reciprocity, so that in every single exchange that we do, we're running a positive balance. And so that means adjusting some of the different practices. Like the usual money back guarantee practice, for example, is you buy something and then if you want to return it, you got to go through this whole rigmarole. You got to get the product, box it back up, print out your original label, fill out a survey, send it to this specific thing, and then a month later you get your refund. And that's a game because they realize that most people
They're just not
aren't going to fucking do it. So we wanted to change that. And so we said, all right, how do we make it not a game? Well, if they get it and they don't like it, they just let us know and we give them their money back, period. And then some people are like, well, aren't people going to take advantage of that? Some people will, but the law of reciprocity holds in the inverse as well. When you're willing to give somebody that much leeway and that much freedom, generally it's going to be only a select few that are going to take advantage. So we found that despite that, which is, as far as I know, the most lenient return policy in the entire industry, we have one of the lowest return rates on our products. And yes, we have good products, but I also think it's the fact that people can sense that we're not trying to game them.
I think that engenders trust in your customer base too, and that level of loyalty is going to prevent that from turning into like a waterfall of people just trying to rip you off, and I think it speaks to transparency, and that's something that came up, I think, when you had that breach, right? You had like somebody hacked your site, and you were very upfront about letting everyone know before any customer had alerted you to that.
Yeah.
So, perhaps a different company would have just tried to bury it and not say anything. And I think it reminds me of something that came up in your conversation with Gary Vee the other day when you were talking about the benefits of, like, if you take a long-term view in business, the benefits of leaving a little bit on the table in a negotiation and having the long view and understanding that, business doesn't have to be a zero-sum game, right?
Yep.
We can all benefit and rise together, and it's not about having to necessarily gouge the other person. That's not necessarily the win in the long run.
No. I think people underestimate what someone's goodwill and passionate intent can create mutually. If you cut something too close to the bone and you end up with a partner who's half resenting you, half obligated to you, and just a little shitty about it, that partner is not going to be a good partner.
No.
But if you leave them with, and you're the point, and I think Gary mentioned this too, he's like, I'd like to leave more on the bone because it's leverage. And what he's talking about is you leave more on the table, you let them have the positive balance in the bank of reciprocity. They're going to want to give you more, in return. And I think that's the game that makes things grow. And then they give you more, and all of a sudden you're running that balance. You're running a negative balance. Like, all right, I got to give you more, and you start to build this kind of abundance, escalation rather than this, man, fuck that guy, which is the other idea of how it works. And it works not only for customers but employees too. Like, we have that same kind of mentality with how we treat our employees here. Give them as many opportunities to succeed personally and professionally as possible. Like, co-pays on food and massage and free gym, and we don't unlimited vacation times as long as it's approved by their team, and all of the things that we can do. Have Wim Hof out here and take them through breath classes, and whatever we can do to boost their morale and passion, we realize that they're gonna give that back. Like, I never have to beg people to work overtime when we have a sale. People are just lined up when we're doing a 5 a.m, warehouse sale to clear out some old inventory. We got volunteers already signed up. Hey, does anybody want to do this? Sure. The whole thing lights up.
Because they know you have their back.
Right, exactly. And vice versa. So you create this system that really is self-reinforcing.
I think the most brilliant thing that you did in launching this company to success was understanding something that confuses me that most people don't understand, which is the incredible underpriced ROI of podcast advertising.
Yeah.
So you understood, early that this was an opportunity that was underexploited in the marketplace. And by partnering with Joe, you were able to blow this whole thing up in a way that had never been done before. And now, certain companies are kind of realizing this and jumping into it, but really not that many. There still aren't that many. And when I look at the growth curve of Onnit, it all tracks back to podcast advertising.
No doubt. We wouldn't be who we are if it wasn't for podcast advertising and for Joe. That's the single greatest move that I did was, bringing him on as a partner in this company, and that was, that I owe a lot of credit to that, because that got the momentum rolling. That got the word out, and then from there it's just been a matter of accelerating. Like, the hardest thing to do if you're out in the wild is to start the fire. Right. It's not to feed it more fuel. and Joe and a few other podcasts at that time, but largely Joe started the fire. And then at that point, we're just out there, finding dead wood and driftwood and throwing it on the fire and making the blaze bigger.
How did that come together?
Well, I asked Joe, me and Joe were friends at that time, and I asked Joe, I said, Joe, what would be the product that you would like the most? And he said, well, I'd like a really good, plant-based nootropic, like a natural nootropic that really worked. Because there were some other things around at the time, like the modafinils and the different kind of chemical synthetic products, but nothing that was a supplement that you could actually feel. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do my best to make the very best plant-based nootropic that's ever been created. Then went to, my stepmom, some other doctors, psychiatrists, athletes, and put together this batch. And the first batch of Alpha Brain was so fucking strong. It was like, because one of the mechanisms of action is it boosts acetylcholine, so it has a cholinergic reaction. And a cholinergic reaction at the upper level feels a bit like a nicotinic reaction. So what it would feel like if you had a bunch of nicotine. So if anybody smoked too much of a cigar or try to dip for the first time and absorb too much nicotine, you get that kind of nauseous feeling that at the tail end of the buzz. And this formula was so strong, so cholinergic that it was borderline, too much for most people. But Joe just loved it. He was like, "This is the best. I love this thing." And but regardless, we knew we had something. We knew that if we had a driver to the formula, we had some things in there to balance it out, make it more robust, target some different systems in the brain. But we had something that worked, and then it was just about finding the sweet spot of dosage and how to make it work. And at that point, we still hadn't even really talked about business, but basically I designed Alpha Brain for Joe, and then so we knew that something was going to happen. And then sales started rolling in, and at that point we just kind of went back and forth a few times about what we felt like was fair, and just settled on a number. And it was cool at that point because I really got to understand what it would be like with Joe as a partner. Because I remember when, and I've told this story before, but we were negotiating his equity position, and I was in marketing and investment banking, and I sometimes use some negotiation tactics to kind of help, just help your case and help your position. And so I said something like, yeah, I was going to carve this piece out and leave that for me so I can pass that on to my kids. And it wasn't untrue. I do plan on passing on some of this company to my kids. It wasn't a lie. But it wasn't like the most honest representation of what I was really going to use that equity for. So Joe goes, "Hey man, I don't give a fuck about your imaginary kids." I go, "Yeah, you're right." And at that point it was like, all right, we're going to do this, but we're going to communicate at 100. We're not going to shade anything. We're not going to overspin the cue ball. We're not going to, play any kind of posturing. We're just going to say it exactly like it is. Like, this is how I feel. How do you feel about that? And we've always fallen back to that, just communication at 100. And it's been 100% the best business partner, maybe the best partner, honestly, I've ever had. And just that you never have to think if something goes wrong, and I have to tell Joe, I don't think about how I'm going to position it. I don't think about, oh man, how am I going to break the news to Joe? There's no how. It's just, okay, when can I get him on the phone? And then I just say it like it is. And if something good happens, just say it like it is. It's a really great way to have communication. It's something that I've strived for not only in business, but in my personal life. Because when you don't have to think about how to PR your way and market your way and shade and posture, you can just relax and just talk to people.
The ability to have that juggernaut of a podcast at your disposal, is just, you can't overestimate the impact of that on your business. It's just incredible. And it's always, and you have a podcast, right?
Yep.
And I've been doing this for 4 years, and you look at the advertisers and it's the same people, and I have great sponsors, Casper and Harry's and MeUndies, and, there's cool companies that are, forward thinking, that have a similar idea that you had, but it just amazes me that there aren't more, because it's underpriced. Basically it's an opportunity for a company to tap into a demographic of people who are already inclined to want to buy their product and speak to them directly with a human voice. and the conversion rates are super high, and yet it's not that expensive. And the marketplace is still looking at those more traditional modes that aren't converting at nearly the rate that podcast advertising. So I'm always like, why aren't more people doing this?
Yeah, people's bullshit detectors are really strong these days. And I think podcasts allow people to get to know the host, and then they can tell when the host is actually talking genuinely about the products that they're advertising. You know, like they can tell the difference between that and the here I'm just reading this ad. And I think that's another move that we've made, is we don't give people, reads unless they really ask for one. We just basically send them a box of stuff and say, look, talk about whatever you want to talk about, anything that you use, anything that you like, just, explain it honestly. And that's going to be the best read anyways. That's going to be the best advertisement that we can do. And I think that's what's been effective. And it's been interesting too, because we have some superstar celebrities that take our products and talk about it, like Ludacris, for example. Movie star, platinum rapper, 15 million Instagram fans or whatever. He can make a post about Onnit and, say Onnit's going to help him live to be 120, best supplements he's ever had, blah, blah, blah. He said that before. And we'll rush to our stat board and say, oh, wow, what's going to happen now?
The traffic.
And it's just crickets. Crickets, right? But some small podcaster like Sean Stevenson, for example, or Lewis Howes, or not that they're that small, they're actually growing pretty big, but some smaller podcaster will mention something and then we'll immediately see the spike. And it's because people have rapport with that individual. They feel like they know them. They feel like they've been sitting in a room as the silent friend, and it's a recommendation from a friend rather than an advertisement.
Why do you think that more companies aren't understanding this, though?
I think the challenge is that it's hard to track ROI. And I think some of the big...
Not if you have those vanity URLs and everything and the promo codes. It would seem to me that it would be really easy to track all that. Yeah.
And I think that's the only thing that I can think of. There's some leakage when it comes to that. People get those codes out and they end up on deal websites. But you're right. You can track it. I don't know why. Maybe it's not big enough.
Because I think the average business I think podcasting is still a foreign idea to most people, even though it's growing, at a pretty explosive rate right now. It's definitely having a moment. I don't know what it's like for you. Maybe it's different for you, but still, I run into people who are like, how do I get a podcast? And I have to give me your iPhone. I'm like, they don't even know that they have that purple app that's built in. They've never clicked it. You know what I mean? And it's literally 2 clicks away from being able to open up a universe of knowledge to you. And they've just I don't know how to do that.
What's interesting is if you look at the demographics too, it's podcasts are being consumed predominantly by men, which is interesting as well. There's not a lot of female podcast hosts. You look at the top 100 and see how many women that you see up there. Not that many. And looking at the demographics of what's coming from that. And so there's still massive parts of the market that just haven't really adopted. And is that chicken or the egg? Is it there aren't enough hosts, so there aren't enough women, or there aren't enough, there's something else going on? I think I've read different theories about that. But yeah, it's still something that's on the come up. But I think nonetheless, it's an inevitable part of human existence. I think the idea that you're going to be listening to something at random, that's just
makes no sense. I haven't listened to the radio in 6 years. Right. And whenever I get into a cab or I'm in somebody's car and they turn the radio on, I'm like, what? Why aren't you making a conscious choice about what you're allowing into your consciousness? You're letting somebody else decide that for you. You're literally asleep at the wheel.
Yep.
I don't get it. It's so easy. And yet there is this weird barrier that somehow we've got to get over so that, a broader demographic of people can be exposed to this.
Yeah. I think automatic integration into cars and into...
That's happening.
That's happening. And it's spreading. You look at the top, Rogan's podcast is a good example. His numbers month after month, they're just going up.
It's crazy how much it's still continuing to grow.
Yeah.
So one question I had for you is you're doing video on your podcast now, right? And what is the impact of that? Have you been doing that all along? Because
No.
I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about adding that in, and I'm just interested in how that's worked for you.
The move with the video is to take short clips that then you can repurpose to all your social media. So like short transcribed clips if you put them on Facebook, you put them on Instagram, they get a ton of impressions. So whereas a podcast we'll get 100,000 downloads, with all of the impressions that we generate, on social media from that podcast, which is like a short 30-second highlight reel or a minute long, whatever. I mean, we can get impressions to 1 million, and then that starts to fuel the growth and starts to let people know which ones they want to listen to, and just put out positive ideas. I mean, a big part of podcasting is, yes, it's a business, but it's also a chance to, make an impact, to share a perspective that could be beneficial. So I think that's the best reason for video is for making the highlight reel, because it's still a little weird to watch people talking for an hour.
That's why it always amazes me that Joe has such a big audience on YouTube for these 3-hour podcasts. I'm like, who is sitting and watching a YouTube video for that long? Apparently a lot of people. Like, I can't imagine doing that. But I think just having the video component to it puts a face to the voice. The unique thing about podcasting is it's the one form of media that you can enjoy while you're doing something else. But what happens when self-driving cars come in? And then it's all about video, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't ignore the fact that video still has to be a component piece of this if you want to continue to grow.
And it's interesting you say that, because, it's top secret. So I'll be banished from our tech team if I release it. But we're trying to think about that. We're trying to figure out how we can make podcasts something that are consumable in a more media rich way. And so I think it's a good line of thinking. Like, it's a good place to start saying, like, all right, how do we make this interesting for someone who really wants more immersion into the content?
Yeah.
And so that's a problem that we're trying to get ahead of and solve, because I think you're right.
Yeah. Well, I've watched how Lewis has been able to grow his show, and he started off with video, and it wasn't really doing anything, and now it's been really, I think, impactful in the growth of his show. And so I think it's undeniable that I'm starting to have to look at that.
Dancing with Ellen doesn't hurt either.
No, I know. Unbelievable, right?
Unbelievable. And that's the beauty of podcasts too, though, because that came out of a relationship he developed with Scooter Braun, which was developed because he had a great conversation on a podcast. Like, the awesome thing about a podcast as a podcaster is it allows you to have fucking incredible conversations with people that normally you wouldn't have for this long.
No, I can come to Austin and find a way to get in touch with you, and we can sit down. I mean, it's like, it's the greatest scam in the world. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to go rob this guy of a couple hours of time and make him show me his gym, and in the middle of a work day, and then get to share that experience. It's been incredible for me. Like, people say, who are your mentors? I'm like, every single guest I've had on this podcast, I've learned something from.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to put it, because it's absolutely true.
So where are you taking this whole thing?
Well, I think for me, it all comes down to the mission. And, that became clear as I continued on this spiritual path, and I started to understand what I thought were the deepest principles of consciousness, something I call the platinum rule, which is treat others well because they're you living a different life. Not treat them as if you would treat yourself, but treat them because
I've never heard it said that way. Where does that come from?
It's really maybe what the golden rule was ultimately getting at, but people say, like, treat others as you would have them treat yourself. So it's this kind of like quid pro quo, reciprocity system, instead of saying no, treat them that way because they are you. They are you living a different life. They're the same. So it's separating that, it's collapsing that duality into this kind of concept of unicity, that we're all the same, just living different lives. We're all, as I said before, like different facets of the infinite diamond. And so with that kind of consciousness understanding, then the name of the game is to just ease the suffering of the collective and improve the overall mood of the one, the overall experience of that one collective consciousness. And so that's really the ultimate game. So how do you do that? Well, you got to help the body out, because when the animal is sick and the animal is tired and the animal has no energy, then it's going to become a lot more inwardly focused. Your emotions are going to become more protective. I mean, try to go up and pet the sick tiger, good luck with that. Mm-hmm. But a well-fed, happy tiger, you can probably get away with playing around and tussling with
for
them. For a minute, right? But humans are like that too. When we're in a great positive state, we're more likely to be giving and loving and kind. And when we're sick and tired and traumatized and wounded, that's when we exhibit a lot of these other behaviors. So kind of like Maslow's pyramid of needs, we got to take care of the body, and that's a lot of what On It is about. And then from there, we got to take care of the emotional body and find the medicines and paths that can treat trauma. And I just got back from the psychedelic science conference, and amazing results coming out of the psilocybin and MDMA studies for PTSD and depression. So treating the emotional body, and then finding reliable ways to not make spirituality something that's kept for the Brahmin priest class, but something that can be decentralized and provided for everybody, sharing the tools that everybody can find some sense of connection to their consciousness and to, these universal metaphysical principles. And that's kind of the path, so from the body to the emotions and the mind to then the consciousness, and optimizing all together so that we just have a better fucking time, so that we play this game, with smiles instead of playing this game, as if it's suffering, because it doesn't have to be suffering. And it's going to have some challenges, it's going to have some pain, it's going to have some struggle, but we wouldn't want to design a game any other way. Like, who wants the video game that comes out of the box with no monsters to slay? No challenges, no times that you die. We want the challenges.
Yeah,
ultimately.
you posted something on Instagram about that
the
other day.
Totally.
Like, you can't. Yeah, it's like we are in a culture in which we have prioritized comfort, ease, and luxury.
Yep.
And the sort of theme that resides beneath that is that we should avoid all suffering and avoid all obstacles so that we can, luxuriate in our robes in front of our giant, flat screen TV. And the truth is that you become alive when you're forced to, confront that obstacle and communicate with yourself and discover what you're really about. And that's where the lotus flower begins to bloom.
Indeed.
And that's a beautiful, it's a beautiful mission. But I think, the average dude out there can understand, the nutritional supplements. You can understand, the gym, getting into the gym and the jujitsu and all this kind of stuff that you do. But I think for a lot of people, the light switch goes off when you start talking about spirituality, right? Maybe not with your crowd now, because you've surrounded yourself with people that are of like mind. But I think the average person out there, guy, I think, kind of hunkers down or kind of cuts himself off or gets uncomfortable when you start talking about these ideas. And I think that's changing, but like, how do you think about that and sort of contemplate how you communicate these ideas that are of the more esoteric?
The key way to communicate is to show them, that I'm like them. Like, I think it's incredibly important. Like, when I'm dealing, because I'm friends with a lot of fighters, a lot of hockey players and football players and athletes, and
here comes the warrior poet.
And I think the first thing is that they can see enough of themselves in me. Like, we can go into the gym, we can crush a workout, we can go to the bar, we can drink some beers,
I can relate to this guy.
And they're like, and they feel like, oh man, he's one of me, right? And then at the same time, I have this other side, which I'm exemplifying certain traits that sound interesting. I'm talking about experiences that sound interesting. So it becomes something that's like, well, maybe this isn't for some other type of person. Maybe this is for me, because if Aubrey, is like me, but also likes this, maybe I'll like it too. And I think that's been, something that I've noticed. And I think that's something that Joe does great as well. Joe is as alpha as any man ever was. I mean, you can YouTube him knocking someone out with a spinning heel kick and walking out without even a smirk, like a straight, assassin. And then, jiu-jitsu black belt, comedian, every aspect of him that's very young. And then he'll be talking about yoga and psychedelics and all of these things. And so I think that's what has been missing. What's been missing is being able to relate to somebody and then say, hey, look, man, I get it. I get your game and I love that game. That's awesome. But here's this other game that's also awesome. And at that point, then people start to open up, and then their guard starts to go down. Mm-hmm. So as soon as you can connect with people that way, then and show them that the other way has tangible benefit and value, then people are all about it.
Where do you recommend people start? Like if you're like, all right, man, like these ideas are brand new to me, man. Like give me a book, or where should I begin this journey for myself?
Well, everybody says to start with meditation, but that's kind of like giving somebody a destination without a map. It's like meditate. Well, what the hell is that? I'm going to just sit and be quiet and let my mind wander around, try not to think about sex or whatever normal other stress that you have. So I think you got to feel what the end goal of that is like first. You got to taste what your target is for meditation. So I think the best ways to do that are either yoga or a float tank. Like those to me kind of get you in that path, because yoga, after breathing intentionally and stretching and kind of going through all of those movements, you have the shavasana at the end, and that's reliably able to get you into a classic meditative state. A lot easier.
That's what people don't get about yoga. And I've said this before on the podcast, but all of the postures, it's not about the postures. The postures are a process or a journey to get you into a mindset where you can receive when you finally get to shavasana. It's all building towards that. And, if you go to a typical yoga class, when you get to the shavasana, half the class gets up and leaves. They're like, I did the class, like I don't need that part at the end. And I'm like, the end is that's the thing. That's why you're there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
But how do you distinguish like float tank from meditation?
Well, float tank is just another way that more reliably gets you there. When all of that default mode network kind of perceptive quality doesn't need, the brain doesn't need to use that anymore, because you can't hear, you can't see, you can't smell, you can't taste, you can't touch. All of these things that we're constantly sensing for danger, trying to read our environment, those are no longer necessary. More reliably, feels like that part of the brain powers down, and your brainwave frequency drops from that kind of scattered beta, hey, what's going on, to that more centered alpha, and perhaps even into theta, that almost somewhere in between waking and dreaming state, which is the goal of meditation. And it's like a tool to turbo your way to that point and at least feel what that feels like. So then, maybe you don't want to go float, multiple times a week to get there, because that costs a lot of money and a lot of time. But at least if you've tasted that and you know what that's like, then you can start doing Vipassana meditation or open focus or transcendental or whatever other means you get there, and say, all right, can I get back to that state that I tasted in the float tank, or get back to that state that I tasted with yoga, and get there. Another great one too is ecstatic dance, which is something that I've been practicing, which is basically removing your mind as the judge of your movement. So there's just a direct connection between sound and your body, and just allowing your mind to get out of the way. And that will put you in, it's one of the classic kind of trance states that multiple cultures have developed, from the Lakota sun dance to the whirling dervishes to all of these different, cultures have used dance to get there. And that's another one that you can do.
That'll really allow you to confront your ego in a huge way, because
and
like you're just like, how am I looking? I don't want to look like an idiot. Like that. I mean, that interplay that goes on,
right.
Especially for guys, I think, it's harder to kind of let go and allow yourself to just, move your body in that kind of
you start
way.
moving your hips one way, and some voice in your head goes, now you're for sure gay. Like you have all these judgments about your sexuality and your masculinity and all of these things that as soon as you let that out of the way and you just start moving, you can enter those kind of classic meditative flow states, what the psychologist would call superfluidity, where it's just body and input, and then you're moving. So in that same way, I think flow state is another great way to get out of your head, so to speak. And you can find that in sports, and I think it's one of the reasons why people enjoy sports so much. I think a great overview of this whole concept is in that latest book by Jamie Wheal and Stephen Kotler called Stealing Fire. Talks about ecstasis, these altered states of consciousness, and how it's just a primary evolutionary drive to find that. And once you find that and then start intentionally cultivating that, that's when you can start making real advances.
I think a lot of people want to know where that's going to go before they will take that first step.
Yeah.
They want to have it all worked out and understood in their mind, logically. They want to be able to put it in that box. Where does that square peg go? And it doesn't work that way.
No.
You got to have the courage and the faith to engage in the attempt and be comfortable with the unknowing. And I think that's where you allow the space for some of that magic to occur.
Yeah. And not everything's going to be a hit. Like you're going to take some false steps. Like I tried this, what was supposed to be this great medicine called Cambo, which is basically this poison that they extract from a frog, and they burn your arm and they rub it on you and you get horribly, violently ill. Well, I got horribly, violently ill. My throat closed. I mean,
what was supposed to happen?
I was supposed to have this heightened clarity, and it was supposed to be incredible, this deep cleanse. No, I just almost died, and I felt sick for 2 months. Like it's not everything that I've tried has been a success. I've tried different forms of like Reiki healing, where people are like moving energy and bashing chimes, and it was like nothing happened. I've tried a variety of different things, but you start to find the things that work, and then
but you got to be open. You got to be open to the trying.
Yeah, you got to be willing to swing a few times and miss and have a few strikeouts. Same in that as in business. If you're terrified of screwing up, you're not going to get really far. I mean, I fuck up constantly. I'm amazed at how many mistakes that I make, but by just acknowledging it and being like, all right, well, what can I learn from this? Then that allows you to move forward.
So let's walk through a day in the life, since you're writing about it right now.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Like it's popular to talk about morning routines. What's your morning routine? The idea is if you adopt, so-and-so's morning routine, that you will become that person somehow magically. And there's so many different sort of techniques for beginning your day, all of which are good. But I think it also can be overwhelming. Like there's 20 things that I'm supposed to do before I start my day in order to like calibrate myself properly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm right in that right now. So, and I'm trying to make it something that's accessible. So I think the first thing in the morning that I focus on is hydration, light, and movement. So that's what really gets me going. So for me, hydration, I like having a little apple cider vinegar, a little sea salt, a little bit of lemon, and about 16 ounces of warm water. So get myself rehydrated, get the electrolytes back in, get the gastric juices flowing from the apple cider vinegar, set, kind of a base of alkalinity. And then I have these things called the human charger, which are these little earbuds that shine light into your ear holes.
Oh, somebody sent me those.
Yeah.
I haven't tried them yet,
they're good.
though, but they're sitting on my
desk. They're good. So
so what does that do for you?
So, really the circadian rhythm is modulated by light. So, and typically we were sleeping outside, and we were a lot more aligned with natural circadian rhythm, going to sleep when it got dark and waking up at dawn. So this really starts to simulate the conditions of bright light coming in at dawn, but it's actually your photoreceptors that go through your ears and actually even touch the pineal gland, which controls the secretions of melatonin, etc. So I put those in. A lot of times I'll go out and get actual light too. We're in Texas, so there's a lot of sun. So either way, you don't have to have these fancy earbuds to do it. You can now get some actual light so that it triggers your body like, all right, this is daytime. And then a little bit of movement. Sometimes it's a couple burpees, sometimes it's more yoga. And that's the first step. And then from there, I like to do, I like a morning shower a lot of times. And that's
cold shower?
Starts warm. I do all my normal things in the warm. Just because the amount of willpower it takes to crank it cold right off the drop is super gnarly, right? So I start warm and kind of get in there, and then I'll start the Wim Hof breathing. We got a chance to hang with Wim, so that's inhales, breathing in as much as you can, and then releasing without force. And you do that about 30 times until it starts to feel a little tingly. And then when I start to get close, that's when I flip the shower all the way to cold. And then get that, and I'm all done with my washing and stuff. So at that point, it's just about watching my breath. And so the cold water flushes over me. I rotate around, make sure it hits all the cold spots. And then the breath will tell you, how much more breathing you need to do. If you're still gasping, that means you're probably not properly oxygenated for the Wim Hof method. So I just kind of follow the breath. And as soon as I can hold my breath comfortably, I do so. And then hold my breath for as long as I can, which starts to stimulate some of the adrenaline and things that come from a breath hold, and finish that off, close the shower down, and then grab some breakfast after that.
Do you get up super early? What is your sleep routine?
I don't. I'm definitely like a PM kind of brain, so I try to get up at 8 o'clock, and sleep for me really changed dramatically when I was researching for this book, and I read Nick Littlehale's book called Sleep.
I haven't read that
And
one.
he works with a lot of like Manchester United, the British cycling team. And he talks about instead of sleep that you're trying to get in a single night, getting 35 cycles of sleep per week. And so really it takes the pressure off a single night's sleep performance, which can actually, it's one of the reasons why it's hard to sleep sometimes, because you get anxious about how much sleep you had. So he kind of like takes all the pressure off that and is like, fine, if you get 2 cycles, that's generally about 3 hours. A cycle is about 90 minutes. If you get 2 cycles, no problem. Go and get what he calls controlled recovery periods throughout the day. So that would be a 30 or 90 minute nap. The preferable windows are like 2 to 3, when then there's a natural lull in circadian rhythm, or 5 to 7 p.m. And take a 30-minute or a 90-minute nap, or binaural beats, or a float, or something along those lines as like a controlled recovery period to pick up these additional cycles.
Interesting. I never heard that before.
Yeah, and so that to me has really changed the game, because now I think mentally you can get in this place where like, oh man, I didn't sleep, and then the nocebo effect of not sleeping, what you're telling your mind about what you need and what you didn't get, starts to make things even worse. Whereas in this way, it's just, again, looking at balance in that longer lens, similar to what we talked about. Now we got a week's goals. So, we'll have different opportunities to pick it up, different ways that you can pick it up throughout the day. And that's helped a lot.
Yeah, that's really helpful. That's interesting. Yeah, I'm going to check that book out.
Yeah, it's good.
Sleep has been something that I've struggled with. I mean, when I'm training super hard, it's not a problem, but less so, and especially as I get older, it gets really tricky, And so I started. I sleep in a tent on my roof. We have a flat roof on my house,
cool.
and that has improved my sleep like tenfold.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
That's awesome.
I slept the whole winter in Los Angeles.
That's awesome.
On the roof, yeah, and I feel amazing. But then when I go out of town and I have to sleep in a hotel, like it's not easy.
Yeah. I started tracking my sleep too with the Oura Ring.
Oh yeah, I've seen
O-U-R-A.
that. Yeah.
That's been pretty cool to see as well, because now I'm seeing like what periods of the night I'm actually getting deep sleep, and where I'm going and where I'm picking up my REM sleep. And
you can get neurotic on that stuff too, though.
You can get to, and I think if I didn't have Nick Littlehale's kind of model of the 35 hours per week, then it would be even more stressful. Because if it like even this morning, it pumped me out a reading that was like 60%. You didn't sleep very well. Blah blah blah.
Right.
I'm like, if I was relying on the old model, like, oh man, I'm screwed today. I got a podcast. I didn't get sleep. You look at my number. It's terrible. I was up at all these different times of the night. That would be worse. But knowing that, all right, this is over a week's period. So this night was not so ideal. I'll pick one up, in the afternoon, and I'll be fine. I think that's made it a helpful tool rather than this kind of another way to externalize judgment. Because I think you're right. You can get kind of tweaked on that stuff.
Yeah, all the wearables. I think there's some debate about whether this is actually helping anybody.
Yeah. Well, same with like
if you commit a murder, they can track you down. Now, did you see that? The guy with the Fitbit?
No.
Some guy, I didn't read the whole story, but I think this guy killed his wife, and they were able to prove it based on his Fitbit data. Whoa. Because his alibi didn't hold up based upon the data on his Fitbit.
Unreal.
So.
Unreal. Well, I'm not planning on murdering
I know, but it's like,
but if you're
in
having
this age where you're being tracked and everything's being watched in video,
if you're having an affair,
that's next level.
Like your wife gets your data and is like, oh, at midnight you said you were asleep watching a movie.
Right. Your heart rate went up to 145 at exactly 11:30.
Yeah. And you, yeah, that's really funny. Well, it's the same with that, kind of 23andMe, just genetic testing too. You get these ideas in your head, even with food allergy testing, right? You learn some fact. Like I've had people be like, oh man, strawberries. I've always loved strawberries, but it says I'm deadly allergic to strawberries. And then from that point on, whether they actually reacted that way or not before, once they have that data, their mind's going to convince them, oh yeah, strawberries are bad. And then at that point, it's going to manifest that reality. And this isn't woo-woo at all. This is just straight up placebo, nocebo science. What the mind believes, tends to manifest through the body.
Yeah, I think that's a big reason why I haven't done the 23andMe thing.
Right.
And I know there's benefits and reasons to do it, and I'm still open to it, but I think that's what's held me back. Like I don't want how I think about myself to be dictated by some predetermined roadmap, in some certain way, I guess.
Yep.
even though it could
because it's not predetermined, and that's the thing.
But you plant that seed in your mind, and those are powerful. Like you said, once that seed is planted and it takes root, it starts to shape how you perceive your world.
Agreed.
So
agreed. Yeah, I mean anything that generates fear is like a virus, and that virus will infect you unless you can cure yourself of it. And so whatever that is, whether it's a family history of some condition or the genetic testing or some other kind of thing that you've self-generated,
well, that's not even not to mention the fact that we're impulsed with fear messaging everywhere we look every single day. Everyone's walking around terrified by design, in this crazy, insane culture that, we've crafted around ourselves.
I know. Yeah. Capitalism by desperation, motivate people out of fear, has been certainly an element that I think a lot of people have capitalized on, and it's unfortunate, and it's rife in this whole medical community. I mean, people have so much fear, and they look to the doctors as, the only knowledge source for this. And a lot of times the doctor's the right call. If you got a broken bone or you got an infection of some sort and you need to get it done. Anything acute, absolutely. But then, you look at the amount of training they've done on nutrition compared to someone like yourself or some of the top, nutritionists, and it's paltry, like they're not experts in that. They don't know.
Not only are they not experts, they don't even have rudimentary training. It wasn't part of medical school education. And yet we look to them as the know-alls and the answer people for everything. And we need to expand our awareness and our consciousness around these not just this profession, but how we take care of ourselves. And I think by that I mean we need to really shoulder more responsibility and take it upon ourselves to educate ourselves and to attempt and be open to these different kinds of protocols. Like, you tried Reiki, it didn't work for you, it works for somebody else. Explore Ayurveda, learn how to balance your energy systems. The body knows how to heal itself if treated appropriately. And I think, you open yourself up for attack if you start talking about these things, but there's a lot of wisdom in this that is vacant and missing from our current medical establishment of diagnose and prescribe.
100%. Yeah. Do your own research. Experiment yourself, talk to people. And again, that's where I'm grateful for the decentralization of information, that so many things are available. Podcasts are available, books are available. All of this knowledge is available. Some of it may be good, some of it may be bogus, but all in all, we can take control of our information input and start to make intelligent decisions.
Mm-hmm. Well, we got to wrap this up in a minute, but before we do, there's a lot of entrepreneurs, budding entrepreneurs that listen to this show. What kind of wisdom can you impart to somebody who's looking to start their own business, or who's looking to, maybe not start their own business, but exercise a little bit more domain over their life, a little more control over how their time is spent?
I think the biggest mistake that everybody makes is they start focusing on the external before they focus on the internal. You get your internal world straight, you figure out where the boundaries of your ego are, how to control your emotions, where your fears lie, and start to get that straight and get that aligned, then everything externally that you're trying to do becomes way easier. So while we're always looking for what I can start, what I can create, what I can build, like, turn that gaze inward first, and it'll pay dividends outward. I can directly track how much work I've done internally to how much success I've had externally, and that's the way. Otherwise, it's almost like you're building monuments on top of a shaky foundation, and if your foundation isn't secure, you'll destroy what you've created. I've watched so many entrepreneurs just rescue defeat from the jaws of victory. You know what I mean? Like, right at the finish line, all they have to do is just execute, but something is unreconciled in their core. And so they drive that train straight into the fucking graveyard.
Oh, not just business, relationships, anything
everything.
Across the board. I mean, thank you for that, because that's something that I, talk about all the time, and I preach, and that's been my experience in my own life. People come to me, I want to know, help me do an Ironman, help me start a bit, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. And it's like, why do you want to do that? Like, right. What is it? What is missing in your life that seems important to you right now? And maybe there's a good reason for that, and maybe that is what they should be pursuing. But more often than not, they don't even know what is driving them. And without that self-understanding, that self-knowledge, that devotion to the inner work, to self-understanding, to personal growth, spiritual growth, chances are you're just reacting to your environment in an unconscious way, right? Yep. And if you want to be really self-directed in a positive way that is setting you on a trajectory for, unlocking your best self, your most authentic self, what you're here on earth to express, there's no end run around that journey and that process because it all germinates from there.
Yeah, if you don't feel like you're worthy of the success you're trying to manifest, you'll destroy it. And I think that's a big thing that people don't realize. Like, the law of reciprocity will hold for your own self-belief. Like, you really have to believe that you deserve everything good that's coming to you. You have to love yourself, feel that you're worthy enough, have forgiven yourself, because otherwise you'll bring upon yourself punishment to justify how you feel about yourself. So doing that work, is actually getting yourself in alignment with that universal reciprocity. So saying, man, I've done the work, I've done the hard labor, I really, deserve to reap some of the abundance from this abundant universe. And then you'll start to create situations more favorable for that. And it sounds like counterintuitive for an entrepreneur saying this, but time and time again, like, the people who don't feel like they deserve the success have something about themselves that they hate, have something that they don't like and are running from, they bring the world crashing down upon them.
Forget about entrepreneurship, just like for life.
For life.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
It applies to everything. So.
Yeah.
Aubrey Marcus, that was awesome.
Yeah, man.
Thanks, man.
So cool to have a conversation like this.
Yeah, I totally enjoyed it. Love to do it again. When your book comes out, you come back and talk to me.
Let's do it.
All right, we'll have you up to the house in Malibu. I'll feed you a vegan
Fuck
dinner.
Yeah. It's a pretty good vegan restaurants out here in Austin, actually.
You know where I ate last night? I went to Arlo's, the food truck where they have the burgers, it's like vegan junk food, but it's so delicious. Yeah. I ate like 4 cheeseburgers.
Bolden Creek, Casa de Luz, Counterculture. Those are 3 really good spots.
Yeah, those came up. Yeah, next time I'll have to hit them up. But,
yeah, no doubt.
All right, man. Thanks so much. So, Aubrey Marcus, if you want to hook up with him, AubreyMarcus.com at Aubrey Marcus. It was Warrior Poet on Twitter, but now you switch it back to your name, right?
Everything's to my name now.
Everything's to your name now. Onnit.com. Check out all that stuff. Onnit.com/Aubrey for 10% off.
Oh,
right?
shit. You dropped the code.
I know, right, man? So awesome, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Peace. Lance. All right, we did it. That was kind of deep, you guys. Did you like it? I totally enjoyed talking to him. Hope you guys got a lot out of that. If you enjoyed it, give Aubrey a shout out on Twitter or Instagram at Aubrey Marcus. Let him know what you thought about the show. And listen up. 1 out of every 2 Americans will develop some form of atherosclerosis. 1 out of every 3 is going to die of heart disease. That is just insane. And there is one diet, the only diet that has been absolutely proven to prevent and reverse heart disease. It's a whole food plant-based diet, a diet that is your defense mechanism, your insurance policy against becoming one of these statistics, against falling prey to any number of chronic lifestyle illnesses. And a diet, I can honestly say from my 10 years of personal experience, will power you through whatever athletic conquest you set for yourself. My mission in life is to help you experience your version of what I have experienced, eating and living this way. Everything that I do, from books to podcasts to public speaking to my athletic endeavors, are all designed to advance this purpose. And intellectually, if you're listening to this, I think you get it, right? And yet still so many struggle with how to implement these ideas, how to implement a plant-based, plant-centric lifestyle. What exactly do I eat? What if I don't like this or that? What if I'm allergic to nuts? Where can I buy all this stuff? How do I make it? And it's for all of these reasons that we created the Plant Power Meal Planner. It's this incredibly powerful, robust, online, mobile-friendly resource tool that takes all the mystery and guesswork out of the whole affair at an incredibly affordable $1.90 per week. Let's face it, that is like loose change that you wouldn't even know if suddenly it dropped out of your pocket into the couch. And here's what you get. It's unbelievable. Thousands of plant-based recipes, unlimited meal plans and grocery lists, everything totally personalized and customized based on your very individuated, customized, personalized goals, food preferences, allergies, your time constraints, your budget. We have astounding customer support from a team of experts. We even have grocery delivery in 22 metropolitan areas via Instacart. It's all integrated into the platform. We're getting amazing feedback. This is life-changing stuff, you guys. So I can't recommend it enough. I'm so proud of what we have created. And the feedback, like I said, that we're getting from people who are actually utilizing this, it's really heartwarming to see people just grab onto this, make use of it, and change their lives. So for more information and to sign up, go to meals.richroll.com or click on Meal Planner on the top menu at richroll.com. If you would like to support this show and my work, the best way to do that, just share it with your friends and on social media. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts, on iTunes, subscribe. Make sure you click that subscribe button. We also have a Patreon set up for people who want to financially contribute to my work, and I really appreciate everybody who has done that. Also, I send out, I'm laughing when I say this because I was going to say I send out a free weekly email called Roll Call every week that has 5 or 6 tools and tips and articles and documentaries, just helpful stuff that I've come across over the course of the week. And I send that out every Thursday. But I have not sent this out in the last 3 weeks. I guess you can call it a summer vacation. I've been so inundated with so many things that I just have not been able to carve out the time to send one of these out. I promise you I'm going to send it out this week. I'm going to get back on it. Apologies if you've been searching in your inbox for this. But in any event, if you're new to the show, yes, I send out a free weekly email. It is called Roll Call. It generally goes out on Thursday, and it's 5 or 6 things that like I said, I've come across over the course of the week. A couple articles I read, a documentary I watched, a new product that I'm enjoying, etc. No spam, no affiliate links. I'm not trying to make any money off this, just good stuff. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can sign up for it on my website, any of those places where you just enter your email address. And when you're on my site, we have some cool products up there. We have signed copies of all our books, Finding Ultra, The Plant Power Way, This Cheese is Nuts. We have t-shirts, we got tech tees, we got sticker packs and like temporary tattoos and all kinds of cool stuff. As always, I want to thank today's sponsors. Casper, the #1 online retailer of premium mattresses for a fraction of the price. Get $50 towards any mattress purchase today by visiting casper.com/roll and using the promo code ROLL at checkout. And MeUndies, the world's most comfortable underwear. Visit MeUndies.com/roll to get free shipping in the US and Canada and 20% off your first pair. Also, to close this down, let's thank everybody who helped put on the show this week. Jason Camiolo for audio engineering and production and work on the show notes and all kinds of other stuff he does behind the scenes. Sean Patterson for help on graphics. He's the guy who puts together those cool motion graphics that I share on Instagram, as well as all the cool assets that I share on social media and on the website. And theme music, as always, by Anna Lemma. Thanks for the love, you guys. Like I said, I'll be back here later this week with my podcast with Chris Houth and Caroline Burkle, talking about our training and preparation for the Otolo World Championships. And until then, love you guys. Thanks for listening. Appreciate you. Peace, plants, and namaste.